relax in this moment to, as much as possible, let go of any stress that you're holding onto right now, anything on your mind. With each out breath, letting go a little bit more. And if you can bring to mind an image of yourself at some place that's really safe and comfortable for you. So maybe it's a place like this image, a place at the beach, sitting on the warm sand, toes buried in the sand, maybe. Maybe you're in a clearing in the woods. Or maybe you're just sitting on your couch in your living room. Someplace where you feel completely safe, at ease. And where you can let go a little bit more, even 10% more, any tension that you're holding in your body. And maybe taking a moment or so to scan your body from head to toe, noticing any places where you might be holding a little tension, a little discomfort, tightness. And seeing if you can soften those areas a little bit. Maybe noticing if there's any tension in your forehead, for example. Or in the back of your neck. Or your shoulders. Or your hands. And if you'd like, imagine that the sun is falling on your face. You can feel the warmth of the sun on your face. And it's just bringing a little bit more ease, a little bit more relaxation to your face muscles. Allowing your body to just soak up the sun, feeling its warmth. And now just taking a couple more breaths, feeling your breath as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, and whenever you feel ready, you can gently open your eyes if they've been closed. And come back to this call. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. So the title of this particular session today is Self-Compassion, Defined and Experienced. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be defining self-compassion and we're going to be experiencing self-compassion. The more I think about that title, the more I like it. Let's go to the next slide. In the way that we're going to define self-compassion and understand what self-compassion actually is through a little exercise. So if you can click one more time, Nadia. So what I'd like you to do is think about a time when you've had a close friend who was struggling in some way. They had a really bad day. Maybe they had an interaction with a coworker or a family member, and it made them feel really badly about themselves. They felt inadequate. Maybe they felt unworthy. They felt like a failure, and they came to you. What did you say to them? And what tone of voice did you use? And maybe what was your posture or your nonverbal gestures? So, and if you can't think of a particular time when this happened, imagine it. Just imagine that you have a close friend who's had a really difficult day and they came to you. If you have something to write with and something to write on, you can just jot down, what would you say to them? And what tone of voice would you use? I'll give you a minute or two to do this. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Now, what I would like you to think about is imagine that this happened to you, the same kind of thing. You had a really bad day. Something happened that made you feel inadequate, unworthy. You felt like a failure. Maybe something happened at work, discussion with coworker. Maybe something happened at home, but you felt really inadequate. What would you say to yourself? And what tone of voice would you use? And any nonverbal gestures or your posture. And you could click it again, Nadia, so we can have those words up there. I'll just take another minute or so to to do this? Okay, so now what I would like to do is we'll go to breakout rooms just for about 5 minutes or so. A word about breakout rooms. You're not stuck in there. I imagine at this point in a year into the pandemic, everybody's familiar with breakout rooms. But for those people who aren't, first of all, you don't have to go if you don't want to. You can stay in the main room. But it does give you an opportunity to speak in a small group about what you learned from doing this exercise. Again, it'll just be 5 minutes. You're not stuck in there. There's a button on the bottom right to get out of the breakout room if you want to come back to the main room at any point. Yeah, I think that's it. It's always a choice. It's always a choice whether or not to go there. Nadia, are you ready, or Jennifer ready for the breakout? Okay, great. Thanks. Everybody should be getting an invitation for the breakout rooms. And if you'd like to go, just click join.
I'm going to pause the recording since we're going into breakout rooms.
Do we have everybody back? I'm going to assume everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm curious, what did you learn from doing this exercise? And you can either unmute yourself and just speak, or put something in the chat, and Nadia or Jennifer will read that chat.
In our group, I think all of us kind of were being harder on ourselves than we are on others.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else find this to be true?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to share anything?
I stated that that learning how to say no has been a big thing for me that I've struggled with, because I'm always willing to help and always put myself out there. And I'm like, what good would I be to myself if I'm always giving and not being able to receive? And not that that's a bad thing, but just learning how and when to say no, because I wouldn't be able to help anybody if I'm no good for myself. So I have to learn how to step back and say, no, that's okay. It's time for some time for me. So just being able to reflect on my needs and wants, as well as being able to help other people, because I wouldn't be able to if I'm not at a level where I can be able to help other people.
Right, right. Yeah. So this is what self-compassion is all about, actually. It's about, and we talked a lot about this last week. It's about refilling your own resources. It's about taking care of yourself so that exactly what you were saying, so that you can be there for yourself and also be there for others, because you're no good for others if you're exhausted and you're worn out and you're stretched to the max. Yeah.
I know for me that it really depends on, each situation. And I've been blessed to be in AA for many years. And there's a saying in there: hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. So hungry, angry, lonely, and tired spells HALT, HALT. And it's a very, very simple, simple word. And so hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, a lot of times I'm tired. And so when I feel like, or I perceive that I've done something and it's causing me to feel like a loser, or I'm really messed up, it really blows way out of proportion if I'm feeling tired. And so if I can take a nap, which I'm very blessed, well, I'm not blessed that I'm on disability, but if I can take a nap and start my day over again, then I'm kinder to myself. It seems like the people in my life, if I call them, they want to fix me, which I used to do with other people. You just listen to my words of wisdom and I will fix you and make you better. And I know that's not the right thing to do. Or if I can find someone that'll just listen to me and without giving me advice, just take a nap or just do some breathing like you've done, then I know that I'm really safe. It's a matter of being safe. If I feel safe, then I can know that everything's okay. I'm okay right now in this very moment. And I used to think that if I made a mistake, then I am a mistake. And it's so screwed up. It was so screwed up in my thinking. It's taken decades to change that truth.
Yeah, such words of wisdom that you just said. There were like three separate things. I thought, wow, that's perfect. I mean, this is where we go often. We make a mistake and we think, oh, I made a mistake. I'm a failure. I'm no good. I am a mistake. Like we go from something that we've done that was a mistake to, I'm worthless very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. So, so this is one of the things that we learn, with self-compassion practice, is that there's a difference there, and we can pause and we can give ourselves what we need. And so that we don't make that jump, and also, of course, being tired, everything is so much more difficult. Our resistance and our resilience is down when we're tired.
Yeah. And there's a saying that we say in and maybe other people do this too, but we say like when we get a flat tire, we used to call suicide prevention, because everything gets so big, and now we can call AAA,
Right.
Everything's so big, it's scary. It's really scary, It's just so scary.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your wise words. And I know that I've seen a bunch of chats go by. Nadia, or do you want to share?
So there were quite a few that Lori, we don't show near as much grace to ourselves as we do to others. We talked about reassuring the other person and being a safe environment, but we analyze ourselves too much. And another person said, I'm hard on myself, but I'm also able to take time to regroup. A lot of people have a hard time, and seconded that. We talked about curiosity about where this comes from, and I think that was a very interesting question. So we talked about curiosity about where this comes from, not putting ourselves first or being kind to ourselves. So that's a question. And
Where does it come from?
yeah, like, where does this come from? We're curious about where this comes from, this whole, because it seems to be a universal that everyone is saying this, that putting others first and not being kind to self.
Mhm. Yeah,
There's
so
more comments too, so I'll let you answer that.
okay. So yeah, what we know is about 80% of us are kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. We don't know precisely, we don't know exactly where this comes from. There is some research on it that it comes from the attachment bond and is related to attachment, mother-child attachment, and early childhood interactions from the family of origin. There's not extensive research on that, but there is some. So we're still investigating that. We're still exploring that and looking into that. Yeah, other comments?
Other comments included, interesting that I can immediately reassure my friend, but need to examine to a great extent my own accountability in a situation.
Mhm,
And
right.
then a response to that was, we also discussed the need to allow ourselves some grace and space. And then this one was I was reminded of a quote that I heard years ago. If I were to treat my friends as I treat myself, then I would have no friends.
Yeah, so we know this, right? We know this from research. We know that people in general are much kinder to others than much more kind to others than they are to themselves. So this is so the informal definition of self-compassion is treating yourself the way you would treat others when you're having a hard time. And Nadia, if you can bring up that next slide.
Oh, yes. And oops.
Yeah. Yeah, so in challenging times, this is the informal definition. In challenging times, treating yourself as you would treat a good friend. That's the informal definition that Kristen Neff offered us in her first publications about self-compassion in 2003. So Kristen Neff, if you don't know, is the person that that really kind of started the whole self-compassion movement with her research. And she was the first person who defined and operationalized self-compassion with a research scale, both published in 2003, two different publications. And you can go to the next slide. And this is the more formal definition offered to us by Kristen Neff. It has self-compassion has three different parts to it. So the first part is the mindfulness part. And the mindfulness part in this context means recognizing when you're struggling, right? This might seem really obvious. You might think, well, of course you know when you're suffering. But sometimes we push it away. Sometimes we resist it because we don't want to feel it, right? It's not comfortable feeling hurt or feeling sad or depressed or lonely, right? So we do other things. We get busy with work, or we distract ourselves in a million different ways. The other extreme to mindfulness is what we call over-identifying or catastrophizing. So this is when we take things way out of proportion. So imagine something difficult happened to you. One example that I mentioned earlier is you have a difficult conversation with a coworker or with your boss. Catastrophizing would be saying to yourself, this I'm going to lose my job. This is the worst thing in the world. Then I'm not going to be able to get a recommendation from this job. I'm not going to be able to get another job. I'm going to end up, living out on the streets. I'm going to be eating out of garbage cans. My kids are going to be eating out. You could just like spin out, right? So we often do this. We often don't have that balanced perspective, and we catastrophize. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. And common humanity is the understanding that whatever we're struggling with, whatever emotional difficulty we have, is part of the experience of being human. So again, this might seem obvious to you, but oftentimes when we're actually the one who's experiencing these negative emotions, like feeling lonely, feeling like a failure, feeling depressed, we think we're the only ones. We tend to forget, this happens to other people too. We isolate ourselves, and we tend to think we're the only ones. So the opposite of common humanity, or this understanding that this is part of the human condition, is isolation. And then the third component of self-compassion is self-kindness. And this has an active part to it where we actively do something kind for ourselves. So this could be what we call behavioral self-compassion, which is, maybe making a cup of tea, or maybe sitting out in the sun, or going for a walk, or petting the dog, and just allowing yourself to feel the softness of the dog's fur. We're spending time drinking a really delicious cup of coffee and not doing anything else. What happens when we are really struggling, when something difficult has happened to us, is we tend to do the opposite. We tend to be really self-critical. We tend to be self-judgmental. We say things to ourselves like, oh, you're such an idiot. You're so stupid. Why did you do that? Why did you say that? That was so dumb. So self-compassion is about learning how not to do that, is how learning how to be a good friend, learning how to be a good friend to ourselves. Can we go to the next slide, please? We're going to review a practice that we did last week, which is supportive touch. So for those of you who were here last week, we did this, but I'm just going to do a quick review. Supportive touch is, a gesture that we do for ourselves that involves either putting your hand on your heart, or maybe stroking your arm, maybe cradling your face with your hands. We do supportive touch regularly, easily, for our good friends. When our good friends are struggling, especially pre-pandemic, as somebody last week pointed out, we would think nothing of giving a friend a hug, or patting them on the back, putting our arm around them. We don't do these kinds of things for ourselves, but we can learn to. So I'll just briefly go over a few supportive touch gestures. You might already have one that you do for yourself, and that's great. But if not, we're just going to review a few. If you'd like to close your eyes, it's a little bit easier, I think, to get in touch with supportive touch gesture with your eyes closed, but whatever you're comfortable with. So the first one is just putting one hand in the other hand, and just allowing yourself to feel the warmth of one hand in the other hand. Maybe rubbing your hands together. Well, maybe stroking your upper arms, giving yourself a hug. Maybe putting a hand over your heart, or maybe two hands on your heart. We'll do one that I just saw someone suggest in the chat, just rubbing your brow. This really does feel good. It's new to me. Making a fist with one hand and putting it over your heart, putting the other hand on top. This is one that feels strong, feels strength, like strength. So at any time you can do one of these or another supportive touch gesture that feels good for you. We use them in our courses and in our programs that we teach and our different exercises. We use them alone sometimes, or sometimes we incorporate them into other practices, which we will do now. We'll incorporate this into our next practice. If you can go to the next slide. So this is a practice called self-compassion break. And this has 3 different parts, and the 3 parts incorporate the 3 different components of self-compassion: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. So this is a practice that you can do pretty quickly. Even once you learn it, you can even do it in even 10 seconds. But I'm going to stretch it out so that you can see the 3 different parts, 3 different steps. And you would do this practice when you're feeling a moment of difficulty, a moment of struggle, starting to feel tension or stress arise in your life, in your day. But since hopefully that's not happening right now, I'm going to elicit a little stress in you, and I apologize for that in advance. And the way that I'm going to do this is ask you to think of something in your life, a situation in your life that's going on right now that's difficult, that's causing you a bit of struggle. You don't want to go to the most difficult thing because we're just starting out. So maybe something like a 3 or 4 on a scale from 1 to 10. So maybe a problem at work, maybe a little bit of a health problem, maybe something in a relationship. And get a good image of this situation in your mind. Who does it involve? What does the space look like? So once you have a good image of this situation in your mind, you can say to yourself, this is a moment of struggle. This is difficult. And this is the mindfulness component. So we're just acknowledging what's here right now. This is a moment of struggle. Or a part of me is struggling right now. And that's the first part. And then the second part is struggle is a part of life. This is what it's like to be human and alive and walking around on this planet. This is part of the human experience. I am not alone. It's not just me. And this is the common humanity part of the practice. Understanding that these emotions are normal human responses to situations. And now you can do your supportive touch gesture, a hand on your heart, maybe rubbing your brow, maybe stroking your cheek. Noticing what that feels like, comfort. And saying to yourself, so may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I say some kind words to myself. May I give myself what I need. So maybe what you need is some strength, some words of strength. Words like, you'll make it through this, or you can do this, or you've been through harder things before. Maybe what you need is just some love, some compassion. So you can say something like, I'm here for you. I love you. I care about you. And if you're struggling finding the right words to say, and oftentimes people do struggle with finding the right words, think of what you might say to a good friend who is struggling with something similar. And see if you can say those words to yourself. Okay. So Nadia, if you can bring us to the screen where we can see everybody again, the gallery view, thank you. So we just have a couple of minutes, but I'm curious what this was like for you and if anybody would like to share. What was it like going through these different steps? Was one step maybe more challenging than another step? Or did you notice any shifts, either in the mindfulness, common humanity, or self-kindness steps? And somebody said centering.
You know, I feel really, I mean, I don't dwell on it. When you lead an exercise like this, and it gives me the ability to get quiet, I get in touch with how sad I feel that it takes so much effort to, not so much effort. I feel sad that I have to learn to be gentle with myself.
Mm.
And it's very clear where that comes from. I mean, hearing the message of, you have everything you need. You have everything you need. Do you know the people that are starving? You know, uh, learning that you have everything you need. Forget about your wants, and other people do come first. I mean, that's a normal message that I learned intuitively. Maybe not verbally, but intuitively. And that's not to blame or anything like that. It just makes sense. So it's sad for me that at 60 some years old, learning how to have compassion for myself, it's, like I say, unwilling to dwell on it. It just like, oh my gosh, this is like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Catherine, we actually have a term for this because this is a common thing that people experience, that when they start to open their hearts to compassion, to being kind to themselves, this realization often comes up that, oh my goodness, I've been so hard on myself for so long. And we call this backdraft. And the term comes from, it's a firefighting term, and it comes from when firefighters go into a burning building and they don't open a closed door, because if they do, oxygen can rush in. That's called backdraft, and the fire gets bigger. So the term, so we call this backdraft, and the way that we deal with it is either, I mean, it's a long process actually that we don't have time to get into right now, but just to be kind, to yourself in that moment. And the other thing I want to say quickly is that people often feel like just what you said, that if they're kind to themselves, they don't deserve the kindness because people are suffering more, right? We call that compassion Olympics. If you give yourself compassion, it doesn't mean that there's less to give to others.
Right.